Hey guys, it's J. Stephen Roberts here. Welcome to another Real Crusades History podcast. Hope everyone's doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the three levels of offense in the breaking of the Templar rule, recognized by the Templars, and then the corresponding punishments that could be enforced or given out by the order as a result of those offenses. So kind of an interesting topic, actually. Now, what prompted me to do this topic is that in my last podcast, which was also about the Templars, I actually said something in error. I described the loss of habit as the greatest punishment that a Templar who had broken the rule could receive. This is actually incorrect. It is expulsion from the order that was the greatest punishment. Loss of habit was the number 2 punishment for number 2 level offenses. And I actually described in that podcast loss of habit as if it were expulsion, in fact. I guess I was just having a bit of a confused moment right there. But anyway, wanted to go ahead and correct that and clear things up. And also take the opportunity to discuss a very interesting topic, which is how did the Templars enforce their rule among one another? Okay. The Knights Templar were a military order. So they were an order of brother knights. They were monks. These men were monks. Yes, they were knights, but they were also monks, and they lived the communal life that monks lived. And that included a very rigorous and strict rule of life that they were required to follow, that they swore to follow early on when they joined the order and took their vows. Now, the rule recognized several different types of offenses against the rule. So there were, in fact, 3 levels of offense against the rule, forms of breaking the rule that were recognized by the Templars, from least serious to most serious. And each of these varying levels of offense had a corresponding penance/punishment, or penance and or punishment, depending on the severity of the crime. This ranged everywhere from, just doing some minor penances to make up for a minor offense, all the way to very serious things, imprisonment. We'll get to that. But anyway. So the least serious offenses against the rule were those that required what were called graded penances. And graded penances were minor penances imposed for 1, 2, or 3 days a week. Now, these were for basically minor infractions against the rule, neglecting one's duty. These graded penances were imposed according to the rule until God and the brothers showed mercy. So again, as we talked about last time in the last podcast, the community was a very important element of authority in the Templar, in a particular Templar house. So it wasn't just the master of the house who imposed penances and the duration of those penances on the brothers. It was the community of brothers. So when that particular house of brothers felt that adequate penance had been performed by the offending brother, that was when it could be, the brother could be fully restored. Now, the graded penances that were imposed for 3 days a week, these were actually, this 3-day-a-week penance was actually a mercy in itself, because this was a penance that was imposed for an offense that should have merited loss of habit. So the mid-level punishment. But the brothers decided to show mercy, and so they just would impose this 3-day-a-week penance. So that meant that the brother had to do some particular penance for 3 days during the week. And in a second here, we'll talk about what sorts of offenses merited loss of habit. But they were serious things. But yeah, the community could decide, well, yes, this brother has done something very serious, but you know what? He's human like us. He's a fallen creature. Sin is just a reality. We think ultimately his heart is in the right place, so we're going to go with something less serious than the loss of habit. The penances that were imposed for 1 or 2 days a week in the graded penance system, these were for some minor violation of the Templar rule. So, some shirking of duty that was not particularly serious, something like that. So what were these penances? Well, they were basically menial duties in the Templar house that would have not normally been done by a brother knight. The rule describes them as leading an ass, so tending to a donkey, washing the kitchen bowls, peeling garlic or chives, or making the fire, or cleaning, something like that. Just kind of menial labor, something that would have been a penance, a sort of a humbling gesture for a brother knight who came from the nobility. Now, if the offense that the brother had committed was serious enough, then there could be corporal punishment involved, which was a lashing. So this would be, for example, for like the 3-day-a-week penance. If the particular offense was serious enough, then the master of the house could issue a lashing. I think this is a very weird thing for us to think about today in our culture. When we look back at the medieval world, and that this kind of thing was done in monastic communities, or could be done in monastic communities. But this was the world that these people came from. So, and the Templars were just incredibly strict. They took their rule very, very seriously, and so these minor penances were imposed for minor infractions of the rule. But if, a more serious infraction it was taken very seriously, and the punishment that was exacted was serious. So Malcolm Barber, in his excellent book, The New Knighthood, he actually has a portion from the rule which describes how a lashing would have been administered in the course of a chapter meeting. So, this is on page 221 of the New Knighthood. He says, "When the master, or the one who has authority, wishes to put a brother on penance, he should say to him, 'Good brother, go and undress if you are well.' And if he is well, he should undress and afterwards come before the one who holds chapter and should kneel. And then the one who holds chapter, or who should give the punishment, should say, 'Good brothers, see here your brother who comes to this punishment. Pray to our Lord that he pardon his sins.' And each brother should do this and say one Pater Noster. And the chaplain brother, if he is present, should also pray to our Lord for him in such a way as seems good to him. And when the prayer has been said, the one who holds chapter should give the brother his punishment with a whip if he wishes, as he sees fit. And if he does not have a whip, he may use his belt if he wishes." So yeah, I do think reading about this kind of thing, it's kind of weird for us in our world to read about this. But so he talks about the brother should undress. Well, that means he's going to take off his shirt. He's going to be lashed on his bare back. So at the end of a chapter meeting, which was the regular meeting that the brother knights held in their house, the master would urge the brothers to follow right. And Barber also has an excerpt about this. This is also from the rule. "Before he leaves there, the master should instruct the brothers and teach them how they should live, and he should teach them and recount to them a part of the rules and customs of the house, and should ask and command them to be wary of evil thoughts and even more of evil deeds, and to strive and take care to conduct themselves in such a way in their writing, and in their speech, and in their judgment, and in their eating, and in all their actions, so that no excess or folly may be noted, and take special care in their haircut and their clothing, so that there is no untidiness." And a lot of this, you'll notice, is kind of trying to corral the knightly spirit, into this more monastic, monk-like way of being. Because knights at this time, they were proud guys. They were the warrior class. They liked to dress well. They liked to engage in sport on their horses. They were horsemen. They were proud of their horses. the church kind of considered this to be the sin of pride. And Templars were not supposed to behave that way. They were knights, but they were not supposed to bring along these various vices of the knightly class into their conduct. They were supposed to conduct themselves as totally spiritually driven knights oriented only towards holy war, not toward any of these knightly excesses. All right, this brings us to the mid-level of offense that a brother knight could commit. And this was one that merited what is called loss of habit. So loss of habit is basically losing your standing as a brother knight, all the honor that entails, for a period of time. It wasn't permanent. This was imposed for the following offenses: displays of anger and violence, sex with a woman, lying, especially maliciously accusing another brother, so bearing false witness against a fellow brother knight, misuse of the order's property, disobeying a command, breaking the master's seal, reception of unworthy entrance, so that is bringing someone into the order who should not have been brought in, building without permission, staying away from the house overnight without permission. So we can see here, these are considerably more serious offenses than what we were talking about earlier in the minor infractions for the graded penances. You know, sex with a woman, having sex with a woman, so breaking the vow of chastity in that case, misusing the order's property. Now, this was a big one, actually, because the Templars, their entire enterprise was geared toward this cause of fighting the enemies of Christendom, defending the holy places, and their resources were limited. This was a huge undertaking, so misusing the order's resources, it could have serious consequences in the order's ability to fulfill its mission. And then I think also we look at staying away from the house overnight without permission. Well, that's kind of breaking the communal aspect of Templar life, and also risking dishonor. If a Templar is staying away from his order's house, away from the company of his brothers, he could be breaking the rule without any of his brothers knowing. I mean, he could be sleeping with a woman and nobody would know about it, something like that. So yeah, a brother wasn't to stay the night elsewhere aside from his house unless he was on some kind of mission, which the Templars frequently were. And because of that, the Templars were always sent places in groups, in a group of 2 Templars or more than that, but they were sent places in groups, and they were expected to keep the rule no matter where they went, whether it was a diplomatic mission, whatever. So the loss of habit was basically the loss of one's position as a brother knight. You had to give up your horses and your armor, so you had to give up the status symbols of knighthood. You had to engage in penitential labor, so working with the servants. So again, you're engaged in menial labor. You had to eat on the ground. You had to fast for 3 days a week on bread and water. And you could receive a lashing every Sunday at the chapter meeting. So this particular penance, loss of habit, it lasted for a year and a day for the most part. It could last less than that or longer than that, depending on what the community felt was appropriate. But yeah, we can see how seriously the Templars took a serious infraction against the rule. They could impose a very severe penalty for that. Okay, so we're about halfway through this podcast right now. I'd like to take a moment just to say thanks to my latest Patreon supporters, Monty Bush and Eric Rogers. Thanks so much for your support, guys. This brings us to the highest level of offense, the worst level of offense that a brother knight could commit, and the punishment for that. And this was expulsion from the order. The rule gives us a list of the grave offenses which could prompt expulsion: killing a Christian, man or woman; serious theft; abandoning a castle or house without orders; conspiracy against other brothers, deserting to the Saracens, heresy, abandoning the banner in battle, sodomy, or simony. So I think we can see here why these offenses would be considered so serious. I mean, these are just, a lot of these would have been serious crimes anyway, just in medieval Christian society. Killing a Christian, killing a fellow Christian, that would merit the death penalty for the most part. Notice it's killing a Christian, it's not killing anyone. It's very interesting. I remember in Kingdom of Heaven, there's a scene where some Templars are being executed because they had raided a Muslim caravan and killed some Muslims. The Templars raided Muslim caravans, and that was just part of what they did. They certainly weren't punished for that. In fact, there were very large caravan raids that were celebrated as these great victories. But yeah, it's and of course there were Saracens, there were Muslims who were protected persons within the feudal system of the Crusader states. They were serfs, for example, who worked the lands of Crusader lords. And I would imagine that if a Templar killed one of these individuals, that probably would have resulted in some sort of fine or something. I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to look that up, though. So if somebody out there cares to look that up, then please do. Or I might do it at some point. And of course, deserting to the Saracens. This was something that the Templars took very seriously. If somebody betrayed them, or went over to the Muslim side in some way, this was something that they would make an effort to find that person and punish them. Abandoning the banner in battle, we talked about that in the last podcast. This was very serious. So long as the Templar battle standard was aloft, the Templars were not allowed to retreat from battle. So a Templar who did that, who left the banner while it was still up in battle and abandoned his comrades during fighting, such a person could be subject to very serious repercussions. Okay, so let's look at an example of expulsion being applied. The Templar rule records an example of this. So this was in the 13th century, kind of the mid-13th century. 3 Templars murdered a group of Christian merchants in Antioch. They were arrested, and they were questioned as to why they had done this, and their answer was that sinfulness had led them to do it. They were tried, and they were sentenced to expulsion. They were flogged through the streets of Antioch, Tripoli, Tyre, and Acre, all the while crying out, "See the justice the Templars exact from their wicked men." And after that, they were imprisoned in the dungeon of Chateau Pèlerin for life. So very serious, consequences here. Now notice how they were flogged in the streets of several of the major cities in the Crusader states. This was important. It was important to the Templars that they showed their justice being enacted publicly. Because look at this. A group of Christian merchants murdered by Templars. What a scandal. The Templars were required to protect Christians. That was their whole mission. Christian merchants to be murdered by a group of Templars, there could be no mercy for these guys as far as the order was concerned. And this was a very rare sort of thing to happen. I mean, it was very unusual that Templars would behave in this way. But when it did happen, the order came down with full force on the guys who did it. And I think that this was perfectly justified. I mean, what excuse could there possibly be for behaving this way? So it was very important to the order that they showed publicly to the Christian community, we are taking care of this. We will not tolerate this sort of thing from our brothers. So let's take a look at page 219 from Barber's book here. This is an example of expulsion being imposed for a lesser crime than murder. Somebody who murdered another Christian, a brother who did that was inevitably, the best he could hope for was perpetual imprisonment in some horrible dungeon somewhere, but he may have been executed. But this is also from the rule, and Barber is quoting this on page 219 of his book. If a brother does anything for which he should be expelled from the house forever, before he is given leave from the house, he should go naked in his breeches, a rope around his neck. And again, oftentimes in these medieval documents, when they say the word naked, they don't actually mean totally naked. A rope around his neck to the chapter in front of all the brothers, and he should kneel before the master, and he should do just as is commanded of one who is put on penance for a year and a day, and afterwards the master should give him a letter of dismissal, so that he may go and save himself in a stricter order. Okay, the best that a Templar brother who was convicted of expulsion could hope for was being kicked out of the order to some other order. And this was going to be an order that was defined as a stricter order. So basically somewhere where he would lead an even more rigorous life, where he would his life would be even more devoted to penance. So in the case of someone who, like those three brothers who murdered the Christian merchants, they were expelled from the order formally before they were put in prison for life. But it's that element of expulsion, of being the order, throwing you out. This was a serious, just the most serious thing that could be done to a brother knight. Now, being expelled never meant that you could just go off and do your own thing. The Templars were very conscious of that being ridiculous. Okay, so you get the ultimate punishment, but then you just get to go off and live your life, free of your vows to the order. No. Once you made the vows, they were permanent. So if you were expelled, there was some serious punishment that followed that. And again, the best you could hope for was being put into another order. This never included another military order. So you could not go to the Teutonic Knights or to the Hospitallers. It was some stricter, non-military order where you could properly do penance. Now, interestingly enough, the Templars themselves were considered strict enough that they could take some men who were expelled from certain orders. For example, the Teutonic Knights. Knights who were expelled from the Teutonic Knights could enter the Templars. And there's actually a famous example of this. Gerard of Malberg, who was the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights in the early 1240s, he was actually expelled from the Teutonic Knights in 1245 after being involved in some serious financial scandals, and he then was made to join the Templars. The Pope apparently thought that the Templars would know how to deal with someone like that. Okay, so we've been talking all about these harsh punishments, but we have to remember something about the Templars. They were a Christian order, and therefore they had a very strong sense of Christian forgiveness and redemption. In practice, the Templars could be quite merciful with their brothers who committed offenses. Original sin and its consequences were taken into account. We're all fallen creatures. A Templar was bound to have to sin sometimes. So the order was oriented towards redemption and towards mercy. Frequently the brothers would decide that a more merciful punishment was appropriate for a brother who had erred in some way. Also, the Templars took into account the kind of men who were attracted to the order. Templars were, for the most part, taken from the knightly classes. These were men who were born to the knightly role. So they were born to be knights. They were born to the military classes. The military classes had certain habits and predilections that couldn't necessarily be totally driven from a man just because he joined the Templars. But, this was a man who was from the knightly classes who nevertheless wanted to follow Christ in a serious way. Now, let's take a look at an example from the rule of a merciful sentence being imposed onto a brother who committed a serious offense. Now, in this example, a brother knight was out walking with some other individuals near Castle Brahim in the county of Tripoli. And they came near a river, and they saw a bird. and this Templar, he threw a mace he was carrying at this bird, and he missed, and the mace fell into the river and was lost. Okay, well, this was misuse of the order's property. The order, they paid a lot of money to buy expensive weapons, and it was something that, you couldn't just misuse the order's weapons. However, this particular Templar, he's a Templar knight. He's a knight. He comes from a knightly background. Knights are hunting men. They enjoy the hunt. So perhaps this particular brother, he couldn't quite resist, just trying to take down this bird. It was just kind of an instinct almost. I mean, imagine what knights at this period of time were like. I mean, they were guys who, you get them out in sort of a wilderness area, and they see some game animal and they want to take it down, So this particular Templar, this was a serious offense, misuse of an expensive piece of weaponry. This could have merited loss of habit, but his particular house, his brothers, decided that they weren't going to do that to him. They were going to pardon him, and he was going to be allowed to keep his habit. So yeah, the order could be quite merciful, and frequently was. Now, desertion to the Saracens was virtually never treated with mercy. We know from the rule of a particular instance of this, a Templar Mason called Jorge. He fled Acre and went to join the Saracens. He was located, arrested, and imprisoned in Chateau Pellerin. So, yeah, the Templars took that very seriously. Now, sodomy was very rare, but it was probably considered the most unforgivable, the most serious of all the offenses that a Templar could commit. One of these rare cases involved 3 Templars, and this is described in the rule, who were discovered at Atlit, which was a famous Templar castle, to be engaged in what the rule calls acts against nature. These 3 Templars were tried and convicted to be put in irons in the dungeon for life. Now, one of these brothers, Brother Lucas, actually managed to escape and fled to the Saracens, where he lived out his days among the Saracens. Another of these brothers tried to escape on one occasion, but was killed in the attempt. So this was taken very seriously. So there you have it, guys. Just an interesting discussion of the Templars and how they enforced their rule, the types of punishments they could give for certain types of offenses. I hope everyone's having an excellent weekend. And don't forget to pick up a copy of my CD, Scatheless, available both as a physical CD and as a downloadable MP3 package via the link down below. So pick up a copy of that. Scatheless includes my song Templar on it. And everybody take care. Talk to you soon.